He was put in his place, and he was one among many equals.
Yes.
And he doesn't like that. This childish behavior from a sitting president who can't stay in the room long enough to actually make the case, whatever that case is, but rather is peeved because he's not the center of attention.
MSNBC pundit Michael Steele hurling new personal insults at the president following his early departure from the G7 summit last night. To deal with an international security crisis, let's bring in walkaway spokesperson Natalie Beisner, Republican strategist Luke Ball, and New York Post reporter Lydia Moynihan. Thank you all for coming on. Natalie, childish behavior. I mean, he's coming home because he's dealing with war, and it's childish behavior to leave your friends behind?
Exactly. It must be exhausting just being so sure you have Trump figured out and then always being wrong and hating him so much. It was just last year that we had Biden wandering off into a field at the G7 and having to be herded back. I'm grateful that it's Trump in the Oval Office. I think that he's committed to diplomacy and he's committed to peace through strength. And I think that leaving early was part of that. I think the Situation Room meeting is part of that. I think his social media posts are part of that. I think that no one knows what he's going to do next, including Iran. And I think that's a good thing. I think he has them scared and guessing and much more likely to make a deal. And he's still the president that's given us no new wars. So let's not forget that.
And the picture tells 1,000 stories. On the way home, he's giving this extensive press conference to everybody, telling him exactly where we're going and what we're doing. Meantime, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's had a lot of liberal views as of late, but the ladies on The View thought he was going to be on their team. Turned out he wasn't. Watch.
You're an immigrant in this country. Yeah. Did you have a visceral reaction to what they're doing, what ICE is doing?
You got to do things legal, and those people that are doing illegal things in America and that are foreigners, they are not smart. Because when you come to America, you're a guest, and you have to behave like a guest. I'm so happy to see firsthand that this is the greatest country in the world, and this is the land of opportunity.
I mean, the bottom line, Lydia, is it's his last time on The View. We know that, but it was interesting to watch.
She asked such a leading question, and his response was so out of left field for what I think any of those women were expecting to hear. But what he did really well was sort of capture why there's millions and millions of Americans who are trying to enter the U.S. both legally and illegally. And that's lost so much on the left. They talk about this country like it's a horrible, toxic, racist place to be. Why would anyone want to come here? And what Schwarzenegger reframed and pointed out is the fact that this is a wonderful land of opportunity that everyone wants to be in. And that's why this country is great. And we need to preserve those values that have gotten us where we are and that makes this the greatest country. And that's why it's so important that we have rules, that we abide by them and make sure that the people we do allow to enter this country are assimilating. And it's interesting, too, he also makes the point, as somebody who, of course, is an immigrant, he wants, and this was part of the extended clip, he wants people to do this the right way, right? That's how he did it, and he expects the same thing of others. And it's often people who came here legally, went through the process, and they're the most critical of people they see just flouting the rules.
Meantime, RCP job approval in the second term. Put this on the screen because it's fascinating. You have Trump 46.5, Obama 46.4, Bush 45.8. Biden was like it. I don't know where he was, but look at that. Keep that in mind when you watch this. Rachel Maddow, Luke.
This is a president whose approval ratings are more underwater than any other president ever at this point in his term.
Go ahead, Luke.
I think that the only people that can remain this consistently wrong besides Rachel Maddow and remain in media are weathermen, politicians, the Kardashians, and maybe I'll add the ladies of The View. We have what I like to call Beltway whiplash up here because Washington is not used to presidents making good on their promises at all, much less this quickly. And I believe this president is transformational. He's actually making change. The Beltway can't comprehend that. They're not used to it. And so they're just having to deny numbers. And that's the bottom line. They're just not accepting the numbers.
Meantime, I want to watch this watch it with me. Watch this next clip, Natalie, and then I have a quick question for you. Go ahead, watch.
You're sending ICE agents without proper identification into our schools and approaching young kids and ripping them out of schools.
Well,
that's what I'm most worried about.
I mean, fear is the point. of a lot of this.
Fear is a tool of dictators and wannabe autocrats.
Who is actually fomenting the fear is my question, Natalie.
Exactly, because none of that happens.
No.
And they're fear-mongering themselves, and they never give names. The only name they ever gave was Abrego Garcia, and he ended up being a wife-beating human trafficker.
Right.
It's not about instilling fear. You may be fearful because you're here illegally, in which case you should self-deport, or because you're one of the 25 people who still watch CNN, in which case you should stop. It's about enforcing our laws, which we have an obligation to do. Otherwise, laws are meaningless. Democracy is meaningless, which the Democrats claim to care about. And the executive is actually acting like a king if he gets to decide, I'm actually not going to enforce our immigration laws, which is exactly what Biden or whoever was running him did for 4 years.
Here's the crazy thing. Here's the Daily Mail headline. Put this up. Kristi Noem went to the hospital today because she had some bad allergies. And the headline is, Ice Barbie, Kristi Noem rushed to the hospital. Lydia Moynihan, can you imagine writing that about a liberal woman? Can you imagine the grief that publication would get?
I thought we as a society moved away from criticizing women's appearances needlessly about, I don't know, 20 years ago. I also have to say, I mean, I think Kristi Noem looks very feminine and beautiful and elegant and put together. And I think that's one thing that we should celebrate, especially as Republicans. I feel like people put themselves together. Yeah, it's very petty and frankly irrelevant and just a bizarre line of attack. But I'm sure people did click on that headline. So probably from their vantage point, mission accomplished.
Right, clicks, all about, what views and whatever else the metrics are there. Lastly, Newsbusters said this about the Associated Press story. The quote was, you don't say. Here it is. The U.S. economy is in a good place, but the Federal Reserve is not. It goes on to say, most economic data looks solid. Inflation has been steadily fading, while the unemployment rate is still a historically low 4.2%. Nobody's mentioning this, Luke. Final thoughts.
Nobody was also mentioning that Joe Biden's created job numbers were completely wiped out by a correction that they had to make just a few months later, very conveniently placed way below the headlines and way below the fold. So I think this president has reoriented our economy. He thumped the world on the head with these tariffs, and he brought everybody to the negotiating table to create a strong economy for America.
Back at the Nightcap crew, Marianne Rafferty, Jessica Milan Patterson, Natalie Beisner, Lydia Moynihan, Luke Ball, and Alex Gray. Tonight's topic, war or peace? President Trump meeting with his national security team as the Israel-Iran conflict escalates. Is it time for the U.S. to enter the war, or should we keep pushing for a diplomatic solution? Alex Gray.
Look, Trace, I think where we are right now is the president's using every tool at his disposal to deter an escalation in the conflict. Israel's doing a great job in an extraordinary campaign, taking out Iran's capacity. It's time for the United States to focus as much as we can on getting out of the Middle East and on the threat of China. If Israel can do this job for us, we should embrace that with both arms.
Yeah, Lydia Moynihan.
Yeah, well, look, Donald Trump obviously has a lot more information than we do in the Situation Room. I'm all for peace through strength, and given the fact that we have had a pretty bad history of regime change in the Middle East, obviously we need to be extremely cautious, but we also need to support our allies.
Yeah, Luke Ball.
The only regime change that President Trump should be known for is toppling the neocon dynasty that held the Republican Party for the first decade and a half in the 21st century. Israel is strong. We can augment our allies, but we should never put boots on the ground, and we should never get entangled in foreign wars that we have no place being in.